Hi, I'm Jen LaCroix with Habitat for Humanity. I'm a community loan officer here at Habitat for Humanity, and joining me today is my friend Adade.
Yes, my name is Adade. Amenounve, Homeowner Development Coordinator.
We are going to be talking today about what to expect before you walk into a home closing. Now, Adade, you work as a homeownership development coach, but I know you are also a licensed realtor. Is that right?
Yes, I am.
How long have you been working in real estate?
Since 2005.
That's a bit. So you've seen a lot.
Yes, I've seen when the market was hot, when the market was not hot, and now the market is hot again.
Well, let's talk a little bit with people today about those first-time home buyers, which we work with a lot, and what can they expect as they're walking into closing. So before we get to the closing table, let's talk about the day of or those first couple hours before closing. What do you need to know before you get to the closing table?
That's a very good question. And if you look at it, few hours before closing, you have to go and visit that property.
What do they call that in lending real estate terms? They have a term for that.
Final walkthrough.
The final walkthrough, right? That's a big deal because that's your chance to look at the house and see if they've broken things since the last time you've been in there, correct?
Yes, correct, because things can happen overnight.
Yep, thanks. You know, I've actually done walkthroughs before. I'm with my clients, I don't go on the walkthroughs, my agents do. So let me rephrase that and say I've actually had clients of mine that did their final walkthroughs and have called me. And the day of closing, we have issues because they were walking through the home. It rained a bunch before closing, and the basement is now flooded. You're not going to buy a house with a flooded basement 9 times out of 10, right? So it's important to do that final walkthrough. Make sure all the light switches work, turn the water on and off, right?
That is correct, but make sure to plan ahead. Don't be late for your closing.
Don't be late for your closing. So that brings us to the next thing on our list. Verify the time and location of closing. So closings always take place at a title company.
That is true. Yeah.
That's a person that gets paid to have the money exchange hands. We don't write a check out to the sellers and hand it to them. We write a check as a lender out to the title company. We wire the funds over to the title company. And that title company's job is to explain documents to the client, and we need to make sure that we're on time.
That is correct.
Because what happens if we're not on time?
Well, your closing can be delayed, and a few things can happen. You know, title companies, they have a schedule. They have closing going back to back, and you may not close that day. And if you don't close that day, something that you promised to the seller that you're gonna close that day, that might have some
repercussions, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, if you're supposed to close that day, keep in mind you're late for closing. These title companies are backed up. They have closings every single hour. So it's real important that you're not 45 minutes late, because if you miss your time slot, they just kind of move on to that next person and you could get pushed back. And what Adade is saying is sometimes that can be a real pain, because if the person that you're buying a house from is buying somebody else's house, there's this domino effect that happens. And now everybody's panicked on the day of closing, and it's because we didn't verify that time, that location, and made sure that we were on time.
That is true.
Right?
That is true.
Right. So the next thing is everybody meets at the title company. Everyone's going to meet at the title company at the scheduled time. And by everybody, who's all in attendance?
We'll talk about the seller for sure. You know, they want to come there and make sure that they get their check. You'll have the seller's agent, making sure that the seller is represented at the closing. Some agent may not come, but most agent will come, because remember, that's payday. So if you don't come to collect your check, so the agent will show up. The buyer will be there with the buyer's agent. And most and foremost, the lender will be there.
Someone's got to bring the money. Yeah. So usually what you're going to see at a closing table, that's right, is going to be a couple of the realtors, the buying and the selling realtor. You're going to have the seller of the home. Sometimes that seller doesn't always have to be there. They can pre-sign those documents. So they're not always. I have a lot of closings where my sellers aren't.
That is correct. Yeah,
closing,
they can pre-sign.
Yeah, they can pre-sign their documents. Nothing to panic about. Most times they're going to send their agent, their real estate agent, in their stead. That's a real good time to be able to ask questions about the property that you maybe didn't get to ask before. A lot of times I see sellers in the same room with the buyers, and it's a great time to ask those questions. Or I even just see the sellers offer up a lot of information, like, hey, the back door sticks. Don't forget to jiggle it this way and do this, because remember, most times we're not buying a new construction. We're moving into a house that's got a little bit of love on it already, right?
Yeah, I would say gently used home.
Yeah, gently used home. That's exactly right. Well, most people, I mean, it just depends. Everyone's got their different preference. So moving on, The closer is gonna ask, the first thing they're usually gonna ask when you walk into the room, they're gonna get you situated, they're gonna have all their documents that they've got ready, all the parties are gonna be there, they're gonna ask you for a picture ID.
That is
Now,
correct.
as a lender, for me, I send out something to my clients before closing, and I let them know what they need to be prepped. So a lot of times, at closing, you're gonna need to bring in a cashier's check. Title companies will not accept a personal check from you. They want verified funds. So a lot of times you're gonna have stopped at the bank, you're gonna have picked up your cashier's check. And as your lender, I will send you a list. I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna need an ID. There's a couple of different things that the title company asks for. But now we're sitting inside, and we're at the closing table. We've got both the real estate agents there. You're one of those people, me, the lender, who's sitting there. We've already wired the funds ahead of time. So 9 times out of 10, nobody's waiting on our wire. They're already sitting there, and we're waiting for the title company to exchange that money around, but they also are gonna explain the documents
That is
to
correct.
the buyer of the home. Seller's got a few documents they're gonna sign, right?
That is correct. Yeah, one thing that I like home buyers do is try to work on their wrist and make sure that that the hand is loose for signing papers.
They've got a stack
Because
of
they-
paperwork,
yeah, because
depending
they
on the
have a
lenders.
stack,
Yeah.
yeah.
So they're gonna sign those. We're gonna sign the closing disclosure. Now, for those of you that don't know, that closing disclosure is an important one that we spend a lot of time talking about. It lists out all the fees for you. The closing disclosure is one that by federal law has to be in your hands 3 business days before closing. Why? The point of doing that is so that you don't hit the closing table and get a bunch of surprises thrown at you that you didn't see coming at the last minute. So that closing disclosure, you're usually gonna have seen ahead of time. There might be some minor tweaks to it, but expect to, one of the first things that you're gonna sign at closing is that closing disclosure.
That is correct.
So the next thing usually is the mortgage. The mortgage, of course, is a 9-page form that secures the mortgage lien onto the property. That mortgage is recorded at the courthouse, but that's one of the documents that is in every lender package out there. For anyone that buys a home, that's one of the documents that you sign during closing. There's a lot of additional forms. Some of them are lender specific, and it depends on the lender. Some of them that you're gonna see at closing are, again, federally mandated forms that are things that every one of us as lenders have to have. Realtors have different forms too, don't they, right? Some real estate companies have different forms they'll have you sign.
We'll have some writers, that you can sign. Yep.
So after all the forms are signed, you're usually gonna see about 15 minutes where the title company, the agent in charge of showing you all those documents, taking your ID like we talked about before, she's gonna leave the room and make copies because you're going to leave your closing with a copy of everything you just signed. And you're usually gonna see about 15 minutes or so to make, depending, about 15 minutes. And that's a good time at that point to ask questions as a buyer to the seller about the house, right?
That is correct, yes. Yeah, that's that window of the time that the closer is not in the room gives you that opportunity to have some exchange between you
Right,
and the
because
seller.
before that, they're talking about the documents.
That
You're
is
probably
correct.
not talking a lot to the person you're buying the house from
yes.
in between. And I know from experience, the seller has documents to sign, so there's not a lot of conversation that goes on at that time.
That is correct. Yeah, that's when you probably, want to learn about the garage door that doesn't, open from the first click. You have to push it twice before it opens.
And this is the time where we exchange keys, right?
That is
Where everyone
correct.
gets excited,
That
we
is
take
correct.
pictures, and we exchange keys.
That
So,
is correct.
Yeah.
Well, what is that envelope and big bag that they receive after she comes back in the room?
That is gonna be all the loan documents that you sign? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. So let's kind of recap here. What are we looking at for today when we're looking at what we need to do to be prepared for closing? I think the first thing we know is where are we going? Verify the time, verify the location, because why? We've got to be on time.
That is
If we're
correct.
not on time, we will be in jeopardy of our closing getting pushed back, lots of angry, unhappy people at closing. Be prompt, be on time. Bring your ID. Remember, you're usually gonna get a list from your lender. It's gonna remind you about what to stop and get before you hit closing. As Adade said, you're gonna do that final walkthrough for your home. So you've got some prep work to do last day of closing, even before you've got to the closing table. You're gonna get into the closing and you're gonna remember you're gonna sign a few very standard pieces of documentation. You've got that closing disclosure. Every single loan that closes, residential home loan that closes here in the United States has that closing disclosure. Doesn't matter what lender you're closing with. If it's a residential first mortgage, you've got a CD or a closing disclosure. The mortgage, the 9-page note that we talked about, securing the lien on the property. With that, we record that at the courthouse. And then, of course, like I said, you're gonna get copies, documents explained, and now's your time to sit back and talk to those sellers, those people that have maybe lived in the home for 10 years before you, talk to them about the house and what little niches might come along with the property. And as Adade and I always say, this is the fun time, so enjoy yourself. The closing is the time you can go,
Yes.
Right?
Yep. That's the time that you are rewarded as a buyer by getting a key to your dream home, and at the same time, many people are getting paid. Just the seller's agent will get paid, the buyer's agent will get paid, and you get the house.
So, thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this, please like, comment, and subscribe.